rights. And so I saw this article this week. I thought it was great. And it's human rights advocates tell Congress that Bitcoin is essential in countries with collapsing currencies. Now, collapsing currencies. Currencies have been collapsing from the beginning of time. If we look at the last 100 years, I believe out of the hundreds and hundreds, I think maybe 500 currencies in the last 100 years, out of all of those, only two are still around. Only two. That's the US dollar and the British pound sterling. They're the only two. Now, the British pound sterling has lost like 99.8% of its value, and the dollar's done much better, and it's only lost, I think, 99.5% of its value. All the other currencies have died, and we're seeing it happen all the time. So we're seeing in Venezuela 2,500% inflation, which is insane. We're seeing Argentina; their currency has failed 4 times. They in just the last couple decades. I think they haven't seen any of their 30-year bonds ever pay out, and we're seeing it in Lebanon. We're seeing it in Turkey. We're seeing it all over the world. These currencies are collapsing. And so what they're saying is human rights advocates tell Congress that Bitcoin is essential in these countries with collapsing currencies. Now, as I said, the U.S. dollar and the British pound sterling are the only two that are left standing, but they're collapsing too. They've collapsed 99.5%. As a matter of fact, the U.S. dollar collapsed 40% against homes in the last 2 years. The U.S. dollar collapsed 40% against used cars in the last 2 years. The U.S. dollar is collapsing. It's just not collapsing near as bad as Venezuela, Argentina, Lebanon, Turkey, etc. But it says here that a week after prominent technologists publicly slammed crypto for being too risky and unproven in a letter to Congress, now human rights advocates from around the world have sent a rebuttal to U.S. lawmakers defending digital assets for the access they provide to people in countries where, quote, local currencies are collapsing, broken, or cut off from the outside world. All right. Now, some 21 human rights supporters from 20 different countries said in the letter that they've relied on Bitcoin and stablecoins, which allow the trading in and out of crypto without having to go through a bank, as, quote, as have tens of millions of others living under authoritarian regimes or unstable economies. Now, a couple of things to unpack here. So first of all, a week after prominent technologists publicly slammed crypto. So we like to be very clear about this. We like to say Bitcoin, not crypto. So we'll talk about that in a minute. But if we look at Bitcoin specifically, we can see that these human rights advocates say that tens of millions are living under authoritarian regimes and unstable economies are using Bitcoin. So what are they slamming it for, right? What are they slamming it for? Like what's so wrong with it? What's so wrong with you being able to decide what you want to store your wealth in and how you want to transact? What's so wrong with that? We're going to look at some of this here, but it says Bitcoin has seen increased utility in recent months as people from numerous different countries sent tens of millions of dollars to Ukraine via crypto payment rails. So you probably remember that, all this support for Ukraine when Russia invaded, and they raised tens of millions of dollars through cryptocurrency donations. How else could you have got that money there? Right? With Bitcoin, instant, nearly instant and free. You can just send it right there. You don't need a bank. You don't need Western Union. You don't have any of that, especially in a war-torn country that's falling apart. You don't have the ability to get on a bus and go to a bank and get the cash out. Meanwhile, Ukrainians that were fleeing the country were able to take their money with them in the form of cryptocurrency stored on a USB drive. A similar narrative played out in Afghanistan in August when the Taliban took over the country and all the banks were closed down. So, these technologists that wrote Congress from their very privileged place sitting in the United States who have never dealt with a crashing economy, or I should say currency, although the dollar is crashing, and have never had to run for their lives, have no idea, and they don't even bother to think what other people could be going through. Now, I've traveled around the world, and I've seen this firsthand. I haven't had to live it, thank God, but I have seen it firsthand. Now, in this Ukraine situation, Ukrainians fleeing the country are able to take their money with them in the form of cryptocurrency. Now, I know people who fled Russia, and when they fled Russia, they were only allowed, I think it was like $100 or $200 per person. So like a family of 4 could bring like $400 or $800. That was it. All the rest of their money had to stay in Russia. I had friends that have come from Afghanistan. I've had friends that came from South Africa. And when they came to America, they could not bring their money with them. They had to come broke. But with Bitcoin, they're able to take all their money with them. All right. And it says here, and when in Afghanistan, when the Taliban took over the country and the banks were closed down, the banks were closed. How could people even get their money? Now, from these technologists' standpoint, they're technologists who know nothing about economics or human rights, apparently, or freedom. They're saying that it's a waste, but it's not valuable to them, but it's very valuable to the tens of millions of people that have been displaced in Ukraine. It says Bitcoin provides financial inclusion and empowerment because it's open and permissionless. We are not, they said, we're not industry financiers or professional lobbyists. We're humanitarians and democracy advocates who use Bitcoin to assist people at risk when other options have failed. So this is great. You know, one thing is these technologists, they say is that it's too risky. It's too risky. We need to regulate it because it's too risky. Well, too risky compared to what? Because if I'm in Afghanistan, I'm guaranteed to lose all of my purchasing power in 6 months. Is it more risky than that? If I'm in Lebanon or if I'm in Turkey, I'm going to lose 70, 80% of my purchasing power. Is it more risky than that? I mean, a lot of the cryptocurrencies are down 60, 70% in US dollar terms right now. They are. But they're going to lose 60 or 70% in their own currency anyway. So what's their alternative? What's their risk? It's very easy from your ivory tower sitting in America going, oh, as a technologist, it's risky. But when you're facing certain death, when you're facing certain loss of all your wealth, you have to try something different. You can't get dollars. So what option do you have? In Afghanistan, after America pulled out, the Taliban overran the banks, took everyone's money. You couldn't send them money through Western Union. What options do they have? And Bitcoin is solving these humanitarian problems. And this is what is going to change the landscape of the world from these centrally controlled entities into this decentralized world.